The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray October Tuesday that makes you feel like the whole city has given up. Serena Okafor was standing in the parking garage of St. Michael's Hospital when her phone buzzed. Her brother Corey, asking if she was coming to the rehearsal dinner. She almost didn't go. Not because she didn't love her brother. She did fiercely, the way you love someone who shared a childhood with you and still remembered the names of your imaginary friends. But the rehearsal dinner meant the Whitfield family, and the Whitfield family meant Ryan Whitfield, her ex-husband, who would be standing there in his good blazer with his easy smile, playing the role of gracious ex-wife's brother's future brother-in-law, a title so convoluted it almost made the whole thing funny. Almost, Serena told herself she was fine. She had been fine for 3 years. She parked, changed out of her scrubs in the back seat, with the kind of practiced efficiency that belongs only to people who spend too much time in hospital parking garages. Pulled on the charcoal dress she'd packed that morning, and drove to the Ridgecroft Club. It was the kind of venue that existed to remind you of how much you didn't belong. Vaulted ceiling chandeliers that caught the light like frozen water. Staff who moved so quietly you forgot they were there. Corey's fiancée, Annalise Beaumont Tremblay, came from old Montreal money, and her family had booked the whole main dining room for 40 people who all seemed to know each other from some exclusive school Serena had never attended. She found Corey near the bar and hugged him hard. "You look exhausted," he said. "I did a 14-hour shift." "You always do a 14-hour shift. That's because people keep having emergencies." He laughed, and for a moment the tightness in her chest loosened. Then she saw Ryan across the room. He was standing with Annalise's older brother, Tristan Beaumont, and 2 men she didn't recognize. He had the kind of posture that meant he'd already had 1 drink, and was halfway through deciding the room wasn't impressive enough for him. His eyes found hers the way they always had, immediately, instinctively, and something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Not exactly coldness either, more like a calculation being made. He didn't cross the room, she didn't expect him to. Corey squeezed her shoulder. "You good?" "Completely fine," she said, and went to find her seat. The seating arrangement had placed her at the secondary table, the one tucked near the window with Annalise's younger cousins and a few friends who'd flown in from out of town. It was fine. It was actually a relief. She ordered sparkling water, made conversation with a woman named Poppy, who designed sustainable packaging in Vancouver, and watched the main table from a safe distance. Ryan was seated at the main table, of course. He'd become close with the Beaumont family over the last 18 months, ever since Corey and Annalise got serious. He'd charmed his way in the way he charmed his way into everything, with ease, with humor, with that particular brand of confidence that reads as authority, until you know the man behind it. Serena knew the man behind it. She remembered the last dinner party they'd attended together as a married couple, a fundraiser for the Harborfront Foundation. Ryan had introduced her to his colleagues as "my wife, who works in medicine." Not Dr. Serena Okafor, not the woman who had just published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, not the physician who had been quietly offered a position at the University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine that she hadn't yet decided whether to take. Just, "my wife, who works in medicine." As though the thing she'd spent 15 years building was a hobby he'd indulged. She'd stopped wearing her wedding ring 2 months after that. The actual divorce came 6 months later. Clean and civil, because that was the kind of people they were in public. The kind of grief that doesn't make a sound. Across the room, Ryan was laughing at something Tristan said, loud enough to carry. Poppy from Vancouver leaned over. "Do you know that guy? You keep looking at him." "We were married," Serena said. Poppy's eyebrows went up. "Recently, 3 years ago." "Ah." Poppy studied him for a moment. "He's the kind of handsome that thinks it's doing you a favor." Serena nearly choked on her sparkling water. The first course arrived, duck confit with a citrus reduction, arranged so precisely it looked like architecture. Serena ate slowly, half listening to the conversation around her, letting the evening pass at its own pace. Then Tristan Beaumont stood and cleared his throat. "Before the formal toast tomorrow, I wanted to say a few words tonight." He raised his glass. "The Beaumont family is gaining a remarkable man in Corey, but I also want to acknowledge the people in this room who've been part of this journey, including some unexpected additions to our extended circle." He glanced toward the main table with a broad smile. "Ryan, for instance, who has become something of an honorary Beaumont over this past year." Ryan raised his glass with that easy confidence. People clapped. Serena watched her brother's face. Corey was smiling, but it was the smile he used when he was being polite. "Of course," Tristan continued, "Corey comes with quite an impressive family of his own." He glanced toward Serena's table, clearly performing his due diligence as a host. "His sister, I'm told, is also joining us tonight." There was a small, polite acknowledgement. A few heads turning her way. Serena nodded. Ryan turned too, and something in his expression shifted in a way she recognized. The micro-expression of a man recalculating, deciding how to use information. He waited until the main table broke into smaller conversations before crossing the room. Serena. He said it like a statement, not a greeting. Ryan, I didn't know you were coming, I was invited. She kept her voice even. Corey's my brother. Of course. He glanced at her dress the way he always had, a brief inventory. How's the hospital? Busy. Still at St. Mike's, among other places. He tilted his head slightly. What does that mean? She turned back to her plate. Enjoy the evening, Ryan. He didn't leave immediately. He stood there for a beat, the way he always did when he wanted her to feel the silence. Then he went back to his table. But she heard him. The room was just small enough, the ambient noise just quiet enough. That's your ex-wife? One of the men at the main table asked. That's her, Ryan said. What happened? A pause. Then carefully, with the particular cruelty of people who've learned to dress damage as concern, she was always more comfortable in small rooms. Some people peak early, you know? Great potential, but they get to a certain point and they can't make the jump. Too cautious, too inside their own head. Serena kept her eyes on her plate. The words landed with a dull precision, not surprising, which somehow made them worse. She had known he thought this. She'd seen it in small ways for years. In how he introduced her, in how he talked over her at dinner parties, in how he'd once, during an argument she still remembered word for word, told her she thought too small. Poppy from Vancouver had gone very still beside her. You heard that, Serena said quietly. Every word, Poppy confirmed. Do you want me to say something? No, Serena said. Thank you. No, she reached for her water and waited. The main course arrived, roasted lamb with pomegranate glaze. The conversation at the main table turned to business. Tristan's real estate development firm, a new project near the Ottawa waterfront, projected returns, risk timelines. Ryan leaned in, performing his expertise. He'd built a successful commercial brokerage over the past decade. He was good at his job. She'd never denied that. What she denied was the version of her he'd built to stand beside it. Tristan raised a question about the medical district expansion near the development site. Rezoning concerns, hospital adjacency issues. He glanced around the main table. Nobody had an answer. Then Annalise, who was sharper than her gracious hostess performance suggested, spoke quite quietly to one of the servers, and sent a small message through the room like a current. Within 2 minutes, Annalise's mother, Genevieve Beaumont, appeared at Serena's elbow with the particular purposefulness of a woman who had been running dinner tables for 40 years. Dr. Okafor, she said warmly, precisely with full title intact, I wonder if you might join us at the main table. Tristan has a question that I think falls very much within your expertise. The secondary table went quiet. Ryan's head turned. Serena set down her fork, pressed her napkin to the table and stood. She moved through the room without hurrying. She was aware of eyes on her. Annalise's cousins, the friends from out of town, Ryan's 2 colleagues from the main table, Ryan himself, whose expression had shifted in a way she hadn't seen since the divorce proceedings. A kind of confused recalibration. She sat in the empty chair Genevieve indicated, directly across from Tristan and 3 seats from Ryan. Dr. Okafor, Tristan said, and the formality was deliberate. She could tell. Annalise had briefed him. We're working through an issue with the Carling District project. The development sits adjacent to the Queensway-Carleton expansion zone. And we've been hitting walls with the Health Infrastructure Ontario review. Our consultants haven't been able to get traction. What's the timeline on the review? Serena asked. We submitted 8 months ago. It's been in assessment limbo since spring. Serena was quiet for a moment, then, who's your contact at HIO? Tristan named a name. Serena nodded slowly. That review isn't stalled because of the file. It's stalled because that office is waiting on a third-party clinical adjacency assessment. That your consultant probably didn't flag as a requirement because it only became standard practice in the last 18 months. You need a physician with hospital planning credentials to submit a supplementary opinion. Tristan stared at her. Yes. That would explain everything. It usually does. Do you know someone who could? I sit on the Health Infrastructure Ontario Clinical Advisory Board, Serena said. It was the first time she'd said it aloud in a room like this. She'd always kept it quiet. Preferred to work through proper channels, let the outcomes speak. I can't be your consultant directly because of conflict rules, but I can tell you exactly who to call and what the submission should look like. The table was very quiet. Ryan's fork was resting on his plate, untouched. Across from him, one of his colleagues, a man with careful eyes who'd been silent through most of dinner, leaned forward. Excuse me, did you say the HAO Clinical Advisory Board? The provincial board? Yes, you're Dr. Serena Okafor. He said it differently than Tristan had, with recognition, not introduction. You co-authored the 2022 review on integrated care facility standards. I did. We used that framework in 3 of our Alberta projects. He extended his hand across the table. Patrick wouldn't ring any bells, but our firm cited your work in every single proposal we made to the provincial ministry last year. I'm glad it was useful, Serena said. Patrick, she filed his name away. He wasn't the same Patrick from Corey's side of the guest list, clearly. He was Ryan's associate. And the way he was looking at Ryan now was the same look she'd seen on the faces of people who were revising an opinion in real time. Ryan said nothing. His jaw had a tightness she remembered from arguments that had lasted past midnight. Tristan was already reaching for his phone. I need to make some calls this week. Would you be willing to give me 15 minutes at some point? Send a note through Annalise, Serena said. We'll find a time. Genevieve smiled with the satisfaction of a woman who had long ago learned that the most powerful moves in a room look like hospitality. The dinner continued. The conversation at the main table redirected, naturally, the way tides redirect without anyone announcing it. Questions came to Serena now. About the hospital infrastructure review, about the proposed changes to Ontario's health corridor development policy, about a research initiative she'd been loosely involved with at U of T that had made the papers earlier that month. She answered each one directly, without performance, without the soft hedging she'd spent years using to make Ryan more comfortable in rooms where she knew more than he did. She wasn't angry tonight. She'd been angry for about 4 months after the divorce, alone in her apartment with a glass of wine, and the realization that she had been making herself smaller for someone who would have shrunk her indefinitely. Then the anger had turned into something quieter and harder, a kind of clear-eyed determination that she hadn't realized was already bearing fruit until she was sitting in this room, watching it happen. Ryan leaned toward her once, during a gap in the conversation, voice low enough that only she could hear. You're on the provincial board? Yes. Since when? 18 months ago. A pause. You never mentioned it. She looked at him steadily. We'd been divorced for a year when I was appointed. Another pause. Longer. Before the divorce, he said carefully. The clinical work you were doing. The research. What about it? I didn't know it was. I didn't understand the scale of it. No, she said. You didn't. She said it without heat, without triumph. Just the plain flat truth of it, offered the way a physician offers a diagnosis. Here is what is. Here is what happened. Here is where we are now. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, the gesture she recognized from every difficult conversation they'd ever had. I told people you peaked early. I heard. A longer silence. That was wrong of me. Yes, she said it was. She picked up her water glass. I hope the brokerage continues to do well, Ryan. I mean that. She turned back to Tristan, who was asking about the University of Toronto medical expansion plan and whether it was likely to affect property values in the adjacent neighborhood, and Serena answered him clearly and exactly, the way she always did when nobody was performing and the room was just full of people trying to think. Dessert arrived. Maple pear tart with cream, arranged on dark plates that made the gold of the glaze look deliberate. The formal toasts were brief and warm. Corey looked at Annalise the way people look at people they've made a permanent decision about, and Serena felt something open in her chest that had been quietly shut for a long time. After dinner, people moved to the lounge. Cards were exchanged. Tristan introduced Serena to 2 others she hadn't met. One of Annalise's uncles from Quebec City, who sat on the board of a regional health authority, and a woman named Isabel, who ran a medical grant foundation out of Calgary. By the time the evening wound down, Serena had 3 business cards in her pocket and a follow-up call scheduled for the following Thursday. She found Corey near the coat check. You okay? He asked. More than okay. He looked at her for a moment with the particular attention of a brother who has been worrying for 3 years. You know Ryan's been saying things. To the Beaumonts, small things, but I know, she said. It's fine. It's not fine, Serena. He was telling Tristan you were, Corey. She put her hand on his arm. It's fine. Those things don't hold when the person in front of you contradicts them just by existing. He can say whatever he wants. What he says doesn't survive contact with the room. Corey let out a breath. When did you get so calm? About 18 months ago, she said. It happened quietly. She hugged him tight, told him she'd see him at the ceremony, and walked out into the October night. The parking garage was 2 blocks away. The air was cold and clean the way Canadian October is when it's not yet bitter. That particular smell of wet pavement and fallen leaves that she associated with every transition in her life. First day of medical school. The morning she moved into her own apartment after the divorce. The Tuesday she got the call about the advisory board. She sat in her car for a moment without starting it. Ryan had seen exactly what he'd expected to see every year of their marriage. He'd looked at her and seen what was convenient. A wife who worked in medicine, a woman who was careful and competent, but didn't threaten the ceiling he'd unconsciously built for both of them. She hadn't corrected the picture fast enough. She'd spent too long arranging herself inside its frame. But a picture doesn't change what the thing itself is. She had published 4 peer-reviewed papers in 3 years. She had been appointed to a provincial board. She advised hospitals that consulted on billion-dollar infrastructure decisions. She had done all of it without ever mentioning it to him. Not out of secrecy, but because by the time most of it happened, she hadn't needed his opinion of it. She'd stopped needing his validation somewhere around month 4 of the grief, and the work had simply filled the space that left open. She started the car. The drive home took 20 minutes. She took the long way because she liked the lights on King Street at night. The city moved past her windows, orange and blue and ordinary, and she felt exactly like herself. Ryan had told a room full of people that she peaked early, that she was cautious, that she couldn't make the jump. He had said it in the past tense, already sure of his conclusion, already filing her away. She didn't blame him, exactly. People see what they're prepared to see. They miss what they haven't learned to look for. That's not a crime. It's a limitation, and limitations are worth understanding and moving past, not punishing. But she also wasn't going to pretend the words hadn't landed. She was a physician. She believed in accurate diagnosis. And the accurate diagnosis in this case was that she had spent 4 years inside a marriage that had quietly, consistently, with the best possible intentions, treated her potential like a problem to manage rather than a thing worth witnessing. She didn't need Ryan to understand that now. It wasn't his understanding she'd ever been working toward. She thought about Corey's face when he'd looked at Annalise during the toast. That uncomplicated certainty. That particular stillness of a person who has found a place they intend to stay. She thought about the board call Thursday, about Isabel's grant foundation, about the paper she was halfway through writing, the one about integrated care models in mid-sized Canadian cities, the one that she was pretty sure was going to land somewhere significant. She thought about none of these things as accomplishments to measure herself against Ryan's opinion. She thought about them as things she was looking forward to. The condo parking garage was quiet. She took the elevator up, changed into the clothes she slept in, made tea and stood at her window for a while, watching the lake. Some people need a dramatic reversal to understand their own worth. The moment of revelation, the room going quiet, the ex-husband's face draining of color. And there is satisfaction in that. She wouldn't deny it. The small human satisfaction of being seen precisely by the people who refuse to see you. But the truth is, Serena had stopped waiting for that moment long before tonight. Tonight was just the night the room caught up to what she already knew. She finished her tea, set the cup in the sink, and went to bed. In the morning there was work to do.